Welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday YouTube channel. I am your host, Ryan Hartley. This channel is for heart-centered leaders just like you. I hope our time spent together helps you leave a heartprint where those around you are left better than yesterday. These interview sessions are sponsored by our great friends at Elevate Online Marketing. On episode 176, I'm joined by Alina Grenier-Arellano. Alina is the founder of Alegoria Game, the trilingual board game for connection and belonging. Alina discovered the potential for social entrepreneurship to solve the world's most urgent issues and pursued her Masters of Science in Entrepreneurship at the Universiteit of Amsterdam. Alina specialises in identifying, promoting and implementing the necessary conditions and culture that make people shine through, thrive and create together for the greater good. The mission of Alegoria Game is to create a world where connection isn't so scary and each person can feel like they belong and can thrive. It's a great conversation. I hope you enjoy episode 176 with Alina Grenier-Arellano. Alina, welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me, Ryan. It's a pleasure to be here.
I love what you do in the world. I love how you help people. But before we go into that specifically, how did you get into the world of social psychology and helping people in that field?
Right. So my background is actually social entrepreneurship and everything that had to do with using a structure. You know, I came from an NGO perspective or from an international development perspective, and I was so frustrated with so much effort going into sometimes, an endless amount of bureaucracy and missed opportunities. And so I went into social entrepreneurship and I focused on collaborative creation. So most of my research is on that. And on the way, my mom, who is a social and clinical psychologist for the last 2 decades or more, she has her tool, which is now Alegoria Game, and she wanted help. And I thought I would just come on to do the product development stuff and the play testing and the marketing and the branding, but I absolutely fell in love. And I always like to say that it's kind of like the experience of not realizing how long you've been going hungry for until you smell a really good meal. And that's what it was like for me. So I was I always knew a little bit of psychology because of my mom and because it always interested me to be able to understand oneself, but it never went into what it is to provide the communication tools and the resources to help people connect and belong, which is something very different. I was someone very sociable, but I didn't necessarily feel seen, heard, and known. And that change is completely different. And so when I started the play testing, I saw people become just unburdened, and it's a very, very visceral, very visual thing to witness. We think, oh, you can't tell. You can tell when someone's face changes and they relax and connection is no longer scary. So I fell in love with it, and then I realized just how much I needed it myself. That's how I got where I am. Game.
You said 2 words a second ago that I think are really key to the human spirit, and you said collaborative creation. And I've been dancing around this kind of topic for the last sort of 18 months in terms of like, it's kind of what we're here to do, isn't it? The spirit is one of just creation. Whatever it is that we have within us is meant to be manifest within the world and brought to the world and in the service of others, and doing that collaboratively as well. And you just said when connection isn't scary. Why do you think so many people find connection scary?
I mean, I'm the best example for that, because I would be researching so much about connection and what are the healthy communication strategies for groups. And then I remember one of the events that we started holding at one point, after doing many series of play testing, we started doing with the community. And they said, Alina, you never play with us. You're always like just watching and seeing and studying. And they asked me to sit down. And they asked me one of the questions and I felt hot all over. Even if I know that it's good for me, even if I've done this and seen it so many times, but I just felt hot all over. I kept thinking, everything that I tell my participants not to think about, don't think about the right answer. The answer that comes to you is the first one is the best one. And I had to remind myself, but I think that we find connection so scary, and I found connection so scary because it's something that we don't necessarily practice. And it requires a brave vulnerability, which is different than oversharing or like flooding our emotions or letting them overwhelm us, but being grounded in the experience of being seen and heard means that, oh, someone really knows me, and I get to own that experience, and I get to own who I am, the good and the bad, the shadow and the light. So I think that experience, it requires a certain discomfort that ends up leading to good. It's like when you go to the gym, or when you have to relax after a long day, if you've been holding on, like if you squeeze your hand really hard, you let go, it hurts at the beginning, right? But you got to let go of that social stress. And so that's the fear that we have, that initial discomfort with the vulnerability, with the feeling of being seen. And then once you practice it, I mean, I gotta say, I was saved by my community nights, my team building experiences during the pandemic, especially, even if it was online. So yeah, I think that's the initial fear. I think, that sometimes I read out the questions like, oh my God, what would I say? And then they say whatever they want to say, and they realize it's not that bad.
Yeah.
Nobody's judging me. Oh, this is amazing.
Hey, my friends, just want to take a quick moment to thank you for listening to the show so far. I hope it is serving you well. And I wanted to let you know that on the 25th of June, we will be holding a 5-year celebration based at the home of our podcast, Elevate Online Marketing offices in Trowbridge. Our community turns 5 this summer, and I really want to bring great people like you together. We have 3 guest speakers lined up. We will be joined by the YouTube sensations that are Evolution of Dave and Esther McCann. And we'll also be joined by our great friend and TEDx speaker, Tommy Gentleman. It's going to be a great celebration. We'll have welcome drinks provided by Elevate Online Marketing. We're going to have some great food provided by Velicious, and we have a band performing live for the very first time. There's a special connection with the band. All will be revealed soon. But for now, please head to the show notes, get your tickets, and I really look forward to celebrating with you on the 25th of June. Let's get back to the interview. It's so funny, isn't it? The human, the little people within us, they just simply want to be seen, heard, and understood. It's like, right, you can have everything that you desire, so long as that you are seen, you are heard. And when you start to realize that, it takes a lot of courage to bring that to the world, right?
Exactly. And sometimes I think there's this idea, or at least I know I had this idea, that if I talk about myself, not only is it going to be known, or if I'm going to share my thoughts, dreams, fears, even the stuff I'm good at, even like shining through and being, amazingly myself. Not only like it's this idea that someone's going to take that information and take it from me and then use it against me or laugh at it, and then they'll get to keep that like over me. And that can be very crippling. That experience of being afraid of whatever I share is going to be used or held over me. It's very, very crippling. And there are virtuous and vicious cycles, and the vicious cycle of the lack of connection. It's like there are little steps that can bring us towards, not just disconnect, but then our mental health is affected, our physical health is affected, disease can come in, stress creates a lot of disease. But when we're able to shift that and say, oh, I'm going to reach out, I'm going to talk to someone, I'm going to relieve the load that is life, because I can share myself and I can be safe. It's like a small practice, and that's really my purpose. It's like, it's a practice. We don't have to be, there's no perfection. It's just an activity that does a lot of good for us.
I believe that great teams will have these types of conversations, and some organizations out there, when I talk about heart-centered, it just doesn't compute, because they're looking at targets and they're looking at financial metrics and goals, and the spirit of their culture is more competition than it is collaborative. And you haven't got to sell anything to me about creating a collaborative culture, but for those businesses out there that looking at us both with like they've got two heads, and you said the word earlier, play. Like, what has play got anything to do with business and teams?
Yeah, and I'm sure you've seen it, making that transition between a very competitive, narrow-minded viewpoint into the heart-centered and making a heart print. I mean, they sound like, they are completely different languages. They don't just sound like they're totally different mind frames. And so, for example, in my research, I focus my research on, I don't know if you know what maker labs are, and maker spaces and maker ventures. And I was very passionate about seeing that process of what makes people come together and do. And we can say work, but it's not just work. It's not just coming in and arriving at 9 and leaving at 5. It's like, no, I want this to have purpose, and this means something to me. If I can do it with someone else, then it's a lot more enjoyable, it's a lot more playful, and I learn better. And so bringing in that play, I'm sure, I haven't seen you in action, but I would love to know how you bring in play, because that's what makes the jump between I'm here to punch my card in and to just say that I did the thing, and I'm like a one-person machine. But the play, the engagement, the fun is what brings it to a holistic, collaborative team that can do a lot more and can enjoy the process.
I as a leader, I would before I'd left and was doing Always Better Than Yesterday, I think I understood the concept of play. I used to be head of a department of analysts, very left brain thinkers, and I understood that they couldn't do their best analytical work if they were in a state of arousal and a state of stress. So I knew intuitively at this time, I probably didn't have the science for it, I just intuitively knew that we needed to have some good downtime and connect with each other. So I would be telling senior managers, like, my team are really busy, they've got too much work on, they're, a bit stressed, and I need to help them prioritize. And then what they would actually see in my department, if they came out of the lift and looked straight into my office, is that we would be with juggling balls, or we'd be playing noughts and crosses and stuff like that. And if a senior leader saw that, they'd be like, he's having us on. They're not busy. But it would be a micro moment. It would be a small moment in the day where we would be recharging and connecting.
And I love that there's so much movement in that, in the juggling, because we don't realize that, like you said, when someone's in a state of arousal, or from my perspective, under nervous system psychology, that's like an overwhelmed nervous system. So that means that we can't integrate or even identify random or any stimuli around us. And so a lot of our work, or our creative pursuits, or our hard work kind of goes nowhere, or it's very hard. It's like going against sludge, because our nervous system is compromised. And that stress can be broken down and can be soothed with social engagement and with movement. That's why exercise is so helpful. That's why juggling and having fun is so playful, because it takes the stress out. And then working, or then creating, so much easier. So I love that you include movement. One of my hopes is to create a card deck that inspires movement, especially if we work with youths. But in the card now, the question cards that we use, it's a lot about imagining movement and imagining feeling. So we have questions like, how does the rain feel? and things that bring us back to our senses, that grounds us, that makes us be in the present moment and takes the stress away.
Let's put Alegoria front and center there. Let's talk to me about the origins of it, how you come to realize it, and talk to me about how it's used and how it's helping.
Right. So I mentioned that my mom, Tanya, she's my co-founder, and she had this game. And she's a Mexican immigrant who arrived to Canada, and she had to, you have to remake your life when you change country. And her conversations were always very limited to the weather, to this, to that. And then suddenly when she did her Gestalt, which is one of the theories that's integrated into Alegoria's game design, is Gestalt, and she was training. So she was a young woman back then, and she was doing her training and said, what if life could be like these workshops? Because even if she was social, like me, that sense of safety makes you feel like you're never alone. So she started using that when she had her private practice, and when she did a lot of guidance counseling in institutions and in teams. She realized, like, we just need a little nudge and some safety. So these small acts that we can do to better the way that we communicate would be so helpful. And it took her many, many years. The game changed many, many times. And when I finished some of my research in collaborative creation, she's like, okay, help me. And we started, that's kind of how it happened. And all of a sudden, we work a lot with psychotherapists and counselors, but more than that, because it's a trilingual game, we also work with language teachers and educators that first come for, I need a language tool to help learn English, French, and Spanish. And then they come back like, oh my goodness, they're learning so much better. They're not so stressed out. The youths are able to communicate and to make, I'm thinking in French, they're able to make connections that maybe was a little harder. They're more engaged. And it's that engagement that because of the pandemic, we started working with teams. So we mostly work with community sources and institutions that have like a support center or an experience manager that wants to break the daily grind with some play, some social engagement that also supports their mental health in order to make the rest of their work better.
How does it work?
So Alegoria Game is a puzzle and a question card deck, and there are 100 question cards. And every time you answer one of the question cards, you put your piece into the mandala puzzle. And that's how it's collaborative, because the point is the experience, not so much who wins. So we have to remember that it's kind of like that great saying, it's about the journey and not the destination. And you can see that every time that you play something, you notice, there's a lot of reasons why we use the puzzle, but you notice that you really are part of the group. The circle is holding you, and is that process of being held that soothes the stress, that teaches you how to communicate, because we do have rules of engagement, of course, like begin your sentences with I, do try to be brief, and allow yourself to explore. That's the play, the creativity. They're very open-ended questions.
I spent a little bit of time on Clubhouse and I came off and never returned, but I understand that you've been doing some of this via Clubhouse. Is that right?
Yes, I did. It's been a couple months now since we hosted, but we were holding them every week. And the way we connected was through a great coach, Nathan.
Yeah.
And he was shout out to Nathan. Thank you for connecting us. We were holding these games. It was a lot of fun, because compared to doing the private sessions or to hearing feedback from our teachers and our educators and our counselors, or even our team leaders, we were getting a lot more team leaders on Clubhouse. And the beautiful thing was that I didn't know them at all. because it's so open, some people I didn't know at all, you don't see their face, and there's something to be said about face-to-face communication, but that beautiful anonymity was also amazing because people can really be honest.
Yeah.
And let that be a practice towards communicating that way with the people that they know. So we have a team of facilitators, and sometimes they're like, oh, it was, when you have so many sessions, you can say, oh, that one, they were still a bit shy, and this group, they went all out and they were very creative, and every group is different. And you realize that just taking these moments to practice healthy communication is what makes a difference, because it's a practice, and each step matters.
Love that. If I am thinking about my listeners right now, they are middle managers, they're leaders, they're responsible for human beings, they want to lead in a heart-centered way. How might this be something that they can use within their team? Why might they take a look at your tool and consider using it with their team?
Right. So when COVID started, there was this question. Our team is not only not showing up to the office, they're more and more not showing up in general. And that disengagement where everybody has their screen off, or you don't have the water cooler or your team building events, or you're not seeing each other, you don't get a feel for each other. And there were teams that most were new team members that had never met each other.
Yep.
And so the importance of having a very targeted experience that is not about trying coffee and everybody trying, cocktails. I mean, those are really fun as well, but the conversation stops. It doesn't go further than, I like this coffee, I like the other coffee. I'm going to put cinnamon in my cocktail. I'm going to put lemon, that it's fun, but it's still quite shallow. And the point about Alegoria Game is to open up the conversation so that later you feel like, I know this person, and so I can ask for help. And so if I have an idea, I'll say it out loud. I will try. I will be resilient. And if something doesn't go my way, or it doesn't pan out the way I wanted to, because I know how to communicate and I feel safe and I feel like I belong to this team, I can try again. And that is the most important thing when we're holding the team building, because the difference has a lot of ripple effects. So that when you know each and every person, you say, I can ask you a question, I can tell you my ideas, I can be resilient.
Yeah, it's the very comparison between a collaborative culture and a competitive one, because in a competitive one, we don't feel safe around people that we're with. We don't necessarily ask for help or share those ideas. Yeah.
And, I wonder, there's a lot of theory now, and thank goodness, and there's a lot of leaders like you that are making this call to action of, shift your thinking, because it's detrimental to not only yourself, but your workers and your company and your projects. Because, for example, we've worked with government teams as well as private corporations, as well as tool companies. And one of my favorite experiences was we were approached by an engineering company that made tools. And so the engineering team had heard about our team building activities, and they said, we want a session. And I said, lovely, tell me about the age range. And they're all male, and they're all like 30s to 60, and they're in engineering. I said, no, I found the limit. Like, I did not expect, of course I gave it anyways. I said, I had just started the team building session, so I was like, of course I'm going to do it. But I was very afraid, to be honest, to see, can I hack it? Because you need a few people that are somewhat comfortable, and they tend not to be so data focused and not in companies that are so competitive. And they loved it. And that's why it's one of my favorite experiences, because it proved me wrong, which is something I'm beginning to love to do. And it just showed me that everybody can access that sense of belonging, and it can make a difference. And we got feedback like, I've been working with these team for 10, 15, 20 years, and I've never known about XYZ. And they bonded over parenthood, and they bonded over travels and emigrating and so many things that they never had the chance to explore, so that later they can say, this is maybe not my friend, but someone I can trust to hear out this idea or try something new and maybe make a mistake and then have a success. And so that's why it's so beautiful.
Exactly, because all teams are filled with human beings. You know, what a way to honor our human existence by allowing us to be a human being at work. It's so powerful. And I think even, you know, some of these organizations that do want to grow and like intellectually, they'll say, right, we want a team that is collaborative and innovative is a buzzword, right? We want to be innovative. Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, the irony is that those things are a byproduct of that connection. Like you can't just go be collaborative and all of a sudden make it so, and then go and hold personal development one-to-one sessions where you're holding people to account for personal targets. If the goal is to have them collaborate, don't hold them to account for how many times they've done the widget themselves. How many times have they worked with somebody else to it's culture, isn't it? And first comes that connection. I love what you're doing, my friend. It's great.
No, thank you. I couldn't have said it better myself. That's exactly it. Invention is a byproduct of collaboration, which is only possible if you feel safe to connect with another person. And so, like with my research, when I was studying these spaces, there are different kinds of spaces, right? There are some that are called Fab Labs, and those follow the MIT Charter of Rules. And so what they do is they're great spaces to educate, but they don't necessarily make ventures. And I wanted to focus on what collaborative projects lead into making new inventions that are marketable, because they can answer so many and solve so many problems. How come, you know, you expect in theory, when barriers like economic barriers go down and it's financially more feasible to make an invention and start something new. And we're talking about product managers and scientists and all kinds of different people coming together in these spaces. How come some spaces have more invention or more collaborative creation that leads to an entrepreneur, or that leads to it being an invention that's sold to a company? Like, what is that difference? And the most important part for me, what I found incredibly like mind-blowing is that the spaces where someone can have a desk, and that means they own the space, can sit and think and ask a question. When you're coming in and out in a space and you're just going in with this, okay, I have this idea, I'm going to do it like that, and I'm not going to ask any questions because I kind of go in and out and this is not my space to create, I'm not actually going to be collaborating. I'm going to be learning, you know, I can go to a class that maybe a space has, but the maker spaces, that's it. You have a desk. This is your space. You belong. And we have a culture where we take time to share our ideas, to communicate about our problems with our inventions. And it's safe to ask, and it's encouraged to ask. That's what makes all the difference. But that's only possible if it's a safe space without judgment.
100%. And then you think back, right? Okay, the last 2 years, my wife's been working from home at the kitchen table. She hasn't even got a desk, let alone anybody who asked a question. I mean, she can ask me, but I'll be.
No, that's exactly it. Like, there's now a lot of also communities that are trying to do it online, and it's not okay. It's not comparable to in person, but every little opportunity to connect, to engage with someone is valuable.
100%. I truly believe that we can connect deeply with other human beings remotely.
Yeah.
You and I. So you're in Canada right now?
I'm in Montreal. Yeah.
You're in Canada. I'm in England. There is no excuse these days to have a great connection, and it starts with the willingness to do so, right?
Yeah, and that's why nervous system regulation is so important to our work, because that willingness comes from a regulated nervous system. If you're overwhelmed, if you're too stressed out, that willingness you're in survival mode. Willingness comes later. Willingness is a luxury that you got to invest in. And everything that you do towards that willingness to create with others, to grow, is so valuable. And it's a practice. So sometimes, I used to think I gotta do it like this and it's gonna be perfect, and nobody will say anything to anything I do. And that's the only way I felt safe. And it took a lot of work to shift that mentality into, making mistakes not so bad because I'm human,
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have some card prompts within arm's reach?
Yeah, I do. Of course I do. So our question, we used to have categories when we first started doing this. We had categories, and a lot of these question cards that are incredible out there, they have categories, but ours are so open-ended that they're interpreted by each person differently. So they're random. But I'm going to take out one that is based on like personality or on your personhood more than personality. So what is a common trait in your family, Ryan?
What is a common trait? Okay, let me think about this. Well, the answer I'd want to give is kindness. I want to say kindness because we've spent some time, we defined, Team Hartley values. We say we're Team Hartley and we're kind. But I think the reality of the answer and the one I should probably give you is we're all a little bit goofy. We definitely like to make dad jokes and silly jokes and make people laugh. That's for sure.
Silliness is so important. I love that. Thank you for sharing. So usually what would happen now is that you would put your puzzle piece into the puzzle, and then the group has the opportunity to use some of the feature cards, like you have to either ask you a question, they share their own experience. They call times up. So that's about boundaries. And I like to say times up, we're calling boundaries. It's not so much saying no to an experience. It's also about saying yes to another or something that's more desirable for you.
Do I get to choose the color of the piece?
Yeah, you do. We have 8 colors. There's 2 kinds of blues, 2 kinds of greens.
That piece would have been yellow. What would that have said about me?
Yeah, I'm going to show you. Oh, that's a good question. We get that sometimes. This is what the mandala looks like.
Very nice. If you're listening on the podcast, head to YouTube. You'll be able to see that Alina's holding up the mandala.
Yeah. So yellow. Well, I'm going to return you the question. What does yellow mean to you?
It's sunshine, isn't it? Yeah, I'm bringing a bit of sunshine to people's day.
Yeah. Oh, sometimes we would have those questions like, oh, if I only put the puzzle pieces on the side of the mandala and not in the middle, is it because I sideline myself?
Yeah. Psychoanalyzing themselves.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Because I'm not going to tell you, I'm not a therapist, and even a therapist isn't the one who, puts a label on you. We're not about labels, but it's an opportunity to reflect and to make sense of your own experience, which leads me to the last question card, that the last like feature card, which is the Alegoria card. And Alegoria really in Spanish, it means allegory. And the truth is that all these experiences that we live, all these stories that we share about ourselves, it's us who makes meaning out of them. Instead of an allegory where an elder or society tries to tell you, this is good, this is bad, this means this, yellow means whatever I could say, it's you really who has the chance and the agency to make meaning. So another question would be, what are you beginning to doubt? I can answer that one. What am I beginning to doubt? I'm beginning to doubt that, so before I focused so much on the science of Alegoria, and like my work was a lot about explaining what nervous system regulation is and being a sort of, I almost didn't talk about how hard it was for me to feel vulnerable and put myself out there, but I'm beginning to doubt that I can do that anymore, because it is important to share our story. And that's what I talk about all the time, but it was even hard for me. So I'm beginning to doubt that I can hide that anymore.
Yeah. I have a theory, and it's what I mean by about being heart-centered is you capture this spirit of the feeling, the emotion, and that's what will connect you with other human beings, and then the intellectual science will help us try to rationalize something which is so often going to transcend our brains.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that jump requires silliness, requires the sunshine.
Yeah, and all of the emotion in between.
The
That
compassion for that.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. I'll ask you a question now. What does the phrase "always better than yesterday" mean to you?
Always better than yesterday means it's very hopeful. Like that's the first thing that comes to me, always better than yesterday. It's very, it feels like a new day, like the dawn. I really like waking up early in the mornings to see the dawn. And it's just like anything can happen.
So you're going to break out into song then?
Yeah.
You're going to start singing it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your light with us. Where can, if people want to see more, hear more, where can people go? Where should they visit?
Of course. So to see the game and learn about everything that we do, it's on the website alegoriagame.com. And to see more, it would be on Instagram or on LinkedIn at Alegoria Game.
Love that.
Love that.
Thank you so much for all that you do in the world. Thank you for coming and sharing that with us. And here at Always Better Than Yesterday, I'd be honored if you'd leave us with a final thought from your good self.
Okay, a final thought. I think that, well, first I have to say thank you as well for bringing out the heart-centered leaders, not just to share their voice and their experience, but to share that experience and create a community. I think that being heart-centered means just being oneself. We're a lot more than what we think, we just are. And letting that shine through is what makes a real difference.
Love that. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely.
Thank you for making it to the end of the interview here on YouTube. I hope that our time spent together has left you a little bit better than before you push play. Before you go anywhere, please leave a comment down below, some of your key reflections, your key takeaways. I love hearing from you and what this conversation has inspired in you. Let me know what you're going to do as a result of this conversation. I will be back next Wednesday where I will share another inspiring guest. To make sure that you don't miss that, please do subscribe, hit the bell, and you will be notified as soon as it goes live. If you're curious to know how I, through Always Better Than Yesterday, can serve you, your team, your organization, please do visit alwaysbetterthanyesterday.com, and it will be my honor and privilege to help you in any way I can. Keep leading, my friends. I've been Ryan Hartley, host of the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast here on YouTube. Always love.